Welcome back to the next tutorial in the series. For this one we are going to jump into editor scripting. I've been doing way too much editor scripting, and it's something that Unity's documentation isn't exactly the best on, and there aren't that many resources available. So we're going to go ahead and maybe do a few editor scripting tutorials so that everyone can get up to speed. So got a real basic empty project here. The only thing we have is a couple of shaders and a material. And the shaders are dead simple. It's just, it's going to be vertex colors only. So we'll just have a quick look at the shader. Now, this isn't going to be a shader tutorial, so we're not going to go in depth, but basically all this shader's doing is setting the vertex color and returning that color. So it's about as basic as a shader can be. Really simple. And this is something that'll be super fast on iOS and Android, and it's actually some of the tools we've been building are actually going to be similar to what we're doing here. So in the process of learning editor scripting, we figured we might as well build something that is actually useful. So what we're going to do is we're going to make something that lets us take any mesh and set the vertex colors for the mesh, and it'll basically just be it'll work with any mesh at all, any object. And we'll use some of the tricks that we've learned in the previous tutorials. So let's jump into this right away. So there's so much you can do with editor scripting. It was hard to find a place to start. So what we're going to start with is custom inspectors. Now, a custom inspector is basically they let you take your own objects and you could make your own inspector for them. So this would be the transform inspector. This is the camera inspector, and we're going to make ourselves a new class over here and make an inspector for it. So we'll just call it some custom object, and we don't even need anything in here. Just for illustration purposes, we'll give it a couple fields, and maybe an int, and how about rect. Okay, so now we have a few fields in here, and we're not actually going to use those, but just for illustration purposes, we'll leave them in for the moment. So when we want to create an inspector, what you want to do is create the editor folder. So all inspectors have to be in the editor folder. So we're going to go ahead and stick a new script in here, and we'll call it some custom object editor. And this is just naming convention we use, and it makes sense. Just append editor to the name of your object type. So what we get here is good old mono behavior empty class. So the first thing we want to do is we always want to grab the Unity editor namespace, and we want this to be an editor subclass. And that's just why we have to be in the editor folder in order to access the editor functionality and import Unity editor. Unity requires your scripts to be in the editor folder. So what we need now is we need to tell Unity that what's in this class is going to be our inspector. So Unity has custom editor, and it just takes a type, and we're some custom object inspector, so that's all we're going to do is pass that in. So now Unity will use our class as the inspector. So let's go over here and just make an object, and let's stick our script on it. And what we get here is the default inspector. It'd be pretty much what you'd expect. Now, we haven't done anything yet, so this is exactly the standard Unity inspector, but let's just say we wanted to actually make our own inspector. So what we need to do is override one method, and that's onInspectorGUI. Okay, so once we override it, we come back over here, you can see it's gone. So the default inspector is now gone, so we can make our own completely custom inspector if we wanted to here. Now let's just say we did want that inspector to still be visible. You can just call base, and what that'll do is it'll bring the inspector back. So now all of the public properties will still be visible, and there'll be cases where you want the public properties still to use the standard Unity inspector, and then you can add some extra stuff in here. Like maybe you actually have some properties as opposed to fields, and you want to be able to set them. Then that's something you can do. Alright, so on Inspector GUI we have access to all the standard Unity GUI stuff. We can use the GUI class, GUI layout, editor GUI, and editor GUI layout. Just for ease, we're gonna use the editor GUI layout. It makes it so we don't actually have to bother with setting up rects and all that stuff. So we'll start off with a label field, and we'll call it the vertex colorizer. So now when we come over here, you see everything that we put in here is going to start showing up. So if we get rid of this, then all we have is our own inspector. So for a vertex colorizer, what we're going to actually need is a color. So let's stick a private color in here. And what we'll do is we'll just use the good old editor GUI layout to handle our colors. So we're going to say editor GUI layout, and it has lots of stuff already in here built in for us, and we're going to use the color field, but you can take a look through Unity's documentation for this. Like, once you know what you're looking for, the documentation's good, but if you don't know what you're looking for, then it's a bit tricky. They have a lot of stuff already built in for you. So let's go with the color field, pass in our color, and actually let's just use the alternate form. So you can see we have there's a few different versions of this method, so we're going to use this one. So we can pass in a label, then our actual color. So we come over here, and here we go. We now have a color inspector. Alright, so now that we have that, we can actually just go ahead and stick a button in here too while we're at it. So we'll use the GUI layout button. You can see that we can mix classes, editor GUI layout and GUI layouts mentioned before. So we'll make a button that sets the vertex colors. Okay, and for now we're just going to stick a debug log in here, just so we can test and make sure everything's functioning as expected. So we come over here, our button appears, and sure enough it works. Alright, that's all good and well, it doesn't do anything yet, but let's actually, seeing as how we're going to be setting vertex colors, this is something you might actually want to change in your game. It's something you may want to use elsewhere, so we're going to use our good old extension class to handle this. So let's go over here and we'll make a new extension class and method. So we'll call it mesh extensions. We'll come in here, and if you remember from previous tutorials, you have to have a static class when you're making an extension method, and all of your methods need to be static. So we're just going to call this set vertex colors. And we'll just say color. So again, extension methods, we use the this keyword, then the type that we want this extension method to be on, and then we can put our normal parameters. And we're just going to take in a single color for this. And this will be a pretty simple method. All we're going to do is make an array of vertex colors using the color that we pass in and set it. We'll just do a copy paste to avoid the typing out of this. So again, real simple. We just make a color array. We fill the color array, and then we set the colors. That's all there is to it. So now if we go back to our editor, now we need to be able to actually get to that mesh here in order to be able to set those vertex colors. So there's a property on the editor class called target, and you can see that target is just a Unity, it's just an untyped object. So the first thing we want to do is we want to get at the particular class we're dealing with. So in our case, remember, this is an editor for some custom object. So when we grab this target, we can cast it. So this will get us our actual type target. So this is the target of the inspector, strongly typed, And now that we have the custom object, we can actually get at the mesh filter with standard get component call. And once we have the mesh filter, we can hit the shared mesh, and sure enough, there's our extension method for set vertex color, and we pass in the color. So there we go. We have just written our first ever custom editor. So we're going to jump back over here. Let's get rid of this. Let's actually create a cube so we have something that actually has a mesh. And on this cube, we'll stick our script. You see we get our custom, our little custom editor here. And we can set the vertex colors by clicking this button. And you can see it's not doing anything, and that's simply because the material that's currently on this cube is just the standard default diffuse, and this this particular material doesn't actually show vertex colors. So if we just drag our own material in here, so if we click the set vertex color button here, we're setting the vertex colors on this, and you can see that that we've gone blank here, and that's just because our alpha is down to 0. So let's up the alpha, and we click the set vertex colors, and it doesn't look like it does anything, but it actually did. So if we come over here, and you can see that it just updated, and I'll do that again. So you can see that it didn't update, and then if we come over here and just do anything, it updates. And that's real simple. It's basically what's happening there is after we set the vertex colors, we just have to let Unity know that they should run an update on the scene view over there. So if we jump in our custom object editor over here, we just add one more line here. We're going to tell the scene view to repaint. Okay, so now we come back in here, we can change our color, and you can see it updates instantly. Okay, so that's all good and well. It's one way of doing things, but when you're changing vertex colors, you don't want to have to keep clicking a button. So let's make a quick change here that'll make it a little bit more automatic for us. So the GUI class has a changed property. So if we just check if GUI's changed and then make our changes to the mesh, we could just go in here, remove that button, and now you can just drag around and you can get your updates in real time, which is a lot more useful. Okay, we're going to take this one step further, and we're going to add a second color here. And this is just in an effort to make this a little more usable. So let's actually make ourselves another color field, and we're gonna extend this a little bit so that we have two colors. We're gonna call one of them the top color, and one of them the bottom color. And let's just go ahead and, for clarity, refactor the name on this. And if we hop back over here, we're gonna have top color and bottom color now, and we'll be able to set them both. And we're not using the bottom color just yet. But what we'll want to do here is add a new method to our mesh extensions. And we're just going to stick a new method in here that takes in a top color and a bottom color, and it'll let us paint a gradient on this. So we'll actually just call it the same thing. Just basically providing an overload here that takes in a top color. We'll take in a bottom color. And we'll also take in an offset. And the offset will basically just, it'll let us, it'll be a value between -1 and 1, and it'll let us offset the center point of the gradient. So rather than write this method from scratch, I'm just going to copy paste it on in, and we'll go over what it does here. It's basically, it's really similar to our set vertex color method, except the only difference is we're doing a gradient. So what we need to do is first loop through all of our verts, and we want to find the minimum and maximum Y value. And we need that in order to be able to figure out what color we should actually use for points that are in the middle. So we grab that, we get the height from that, and from there we have to loop through the vertices again, and this time we're actually just going to set up our vertex colors, and we'll just do a lerp. So by doing a lerp like this, it's gonna pick a color in between top color and bottom color that's based on our offset here, and also the calculated value. Calculated value is pretty simple. We just take the y value and divide it by the height. And seeing as how we're using generics now, we do have to import the generic namespace. So we come back over here and make sure we have no errors, and we don't. So let's go back into our editor here. Now instead of calling set vertex color, let's call set vertex colors. We'll use our top color, our bottom color, and for the moment we're just going to pass in 0 as offset just for testing here. So we can start changing these, and you can see we get some funky looking gradients. So let's add ourselves one more inspector here, or one more item to our inspector. So we have that vertical offset, which is just a float between -1 and 1. So we'll set it to 0 by default, and we'll go ahead and use the slider that Unity provides for us. Okay, so with the slider we get to pass in our min max, so we're calling it -1 and 1. We have a slider, and now we can pass in the vertex color offset. We have a little typo here in the mesh height calculation. So the mesh height over here should actually be max y minus min y, and that's just to account for the fact that you could have, oftentimes we'll have a mesh that has positive and negative values for the verts. So if we jump back over here now, we can change our colors. Let's give it purple on top, and now we can drag our little offset slider here to change the gradient. This doesn't work quite so so great on a cube, so let's try it on a capsule. So we're going to stick the material on there and get our inspector up and running, and let's do a red on top, yellow on bottom, and then we can shift our gradient using this slider. Alright, so that's the basics of editor scripting. We'll go into more detail in the future. Like this particular setup we just built has some glaring issues. One of the biggest is our top color and bottom color. These aren't actually being stored anywhere. So as soon as we go back to an object, you can see that they jump back to black. And that's just because we're not actually storing them. But we can go into serialized properties and other ways to store that data in the future. Actually, let's just see a really simple way to do it. So I'm just going to grab the top color and bottom color. We'll leave the vertical offset, but I'm going to go ahead and stick them in here and make them public. So this is just one simple way to do it. So now that these are actually on some custom object, we can go back over here, and we'll just need to make sure that we're referencing them on the object. Oops, except we're not going to want to do that. So first thing we want to do is get a reference to our target, which is we'll call custom object. So now what we're going to do is we're going to reference the colors on that object as opposed to in our own private editor class. So if we jump back over here now, let's set this couple colors here. So we set it to red and blue, and we'll set this down to, or up to something like 0.4. So we can see now if we jump back, these colors are now stored, but the vertical offset isn't. And that's just because our vertical offset is stored in the object editor itself, whereas the colors are stored on some custom object. So we could of course move the vertex color offset there as well, And as mentioned previously, there's also serialized properties, which is a really handy way to save these to disk. That way they don't even need to be on the object. But Unity's editor is extremely flexible, so there's lots of different ways to do everything. And we'll start touching on those in future videos. Thanks for watching.